Good evening. Thank you very much for coming tonight to this documentary networking party. I'm just going to introduce our moderator for this evening. It's Charlotte Cook, who was formerly the documentary programmer at the Frontline Club and is now head programmer at HotDocs in Canada. So we're very pleased to have her here tonight to moderate. So if you can just for the Q&A, wait for the microphone because we've got an online audience. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you everyone so much for coming. As Fraser said, my name's Charlotte. We're going to keep this short and sweet because you all have free drinks, so we need to make sure we have enough time that you can do that. Before we start, I'm going to get everyone to introduce themselves, but we're going to have about 20 minutes of discussion, and then we're going to throw to you guys because it's much more important to hear your questions, I think, especially when it comes to distribution. So if Nick, you want to go first. If anyone wants to introduce themselves and say the last thing they worked on, that would be really helpful.
What? How do you mean the last thing I worked on?
My garden.
Yeah, your garden. You can say your garden.
My name is Nick Fraser. I run BBC Storyville and have done for some time. And I've written a pamphlet called Why Documentaries Matter. And if you get hold of Reuters Institute of Journalism in Oxford, you can get free copies.
Oh,
they printed loads of them. I don't.
Why don't you sell them?
I can't sell them because Reuters Institute is a foundation. They do it free. And the last film I worked on was called The Albino Witchcraft Murders, which is a really good film. It's being shown at Sheffield, and it's been put in the schedule at the last minute. If you want to hear me talking about documentaries up at Sheffield, you're welcome. I'm replacing the Chinese delegation, who became very upset because Sheffield wished to show a film about Ai Weiwei, and they're not coming to Sheffield.
Harumph.
Well, I think they should come, you know.
You don't look very Chinese, though.
No, I'm not Chinese.
Good evening. My name's James Mullighan. I am peripatetic and many-hatted. A couple which are relevant is I work for a company called Cinelan, and Cinelan, in partnership with General Electric, has an initiative called Focus Forward, and we commission 3-minute factual stories from leading documentary filmmakers. And we're at Sheffield with a couple of films. We'll buy you a drink if you come to the East End bar on Friday at 6 o'clock. And I can wave hello to my friend Peter at the back of the room, who's an advisor on the project. I also am deeply passionate about the work that this very club does, and have produced a session with Inigo Gilmore, the moderator, and Vaughan Smith, the founder of the club, called Dying to Tell the Story, about the perils of being a frontline journalist. And that's on at Sheffield on Saturday at 12:15. I ran the Edinburgh Film Festival last year. I used to run Shooting People. There's a little biographical sketch.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Does it look like I've thrown to you, or?
I don't know. My name is Mette Hoffmann Meyer. I come from Danish broadcast, DR, and I'm head of documentaries there. I schedule for 4 channels, and I acquire approximately 1,000 hours a year. Then I commission a lot of Danish films. Some of them you might know, some of them you might not. And then I co-produce a lot of international, not a lot, but some every year, of international documentaries.
Great.
Yeah?
My name's Lucas Ochoa. I'm head of film at a company called Pulse Films. Pulse makes lots of different things. We make commercials and we make music videos, and we have television as well. But the bit that I concentrate on is making feature documentaries. And the last film that we did was a film called Shut Up and Play the Hits, which was at Sundance this year, and is coming out in the States on July 18th. And then we're going to be releasing it here in the UK a little bit later this year in September.
Perfect. So my first question to everybody, and I think if you just want to take turns, I guess, is the easiest way to do it, is firstly what you feel a distributor's role is in terms of what you do, and what your kind of ideal version of what a distributor can be to your role. We're saying Mette first then.
Like people want to sell me something?
Yeah.
Well,
Well, that can come in anyway. I don't want anything to be sold when I'm at the toilet or the loo. But otherwise, I can have, like 10 lines what the film is about, and I read them. I read all the mails. People send me links, and I see them. And a bottle of champagne is good too to get sort of access. I don't know. I mean, I work a lot, of course, with the big distributors because we buy many hours, and I go to a lot of festivals like HotDocs and Eat Fair in Sheffield, the big, Cannes, MIP and MIPCOM. I go to Sundance this year. I had 5 films at Sundance that I had commissioned.
And did they have distribution when they went? No.
Some of them had, some didn't. So, it works in many ways, and there are many entrances. Not champagne is good, I think.
Okay, champagne is the answer.
Yeah, definitely. Champagne is good.
What about you, Nick, in terms of book?
Well, the champagne is good, and essentially we would aim to do without distributors, actually, because if it were possible to run Storyville solely working with filmmakers, we aim to work with filmmakers with our money from the BBC at the earliest stage possible. Though in practice we do about a third from scratch, a third invested partway through and a third finished. But on the whole, there are a small number of distributors we love and work with, but we really, really prefer to get in earlier into the films because money is very scarce, and that's how we can make the BBC money work. And it's also how we end up getting what we want. I mean, 8 or 9 times out of 10, by the time a film is in distribution, if we haven't seen it, it's not really the film we wanted in the first place.
I'm going to throw to Lucas next, because you're a kind of filmmaker representation on the panel.
Sure.
In terms of, you've just had a film picked up for distribution by Oscilloscope, which is a very, very good distributor. What were you looking for when you were choosing which distributor to go with?
But no, I was going to be, choose is interesting, but no, that's not quite true. I think that the primary thing was that it wasn't about an MG and that being a sizable figure, because the other thing was what strategy that they have for releasing the film, and then trying to use our sort of best guess about what that might mean for us, because obviously we needed to make a certain amount back and everything else. And I think the other thing was that it needed to be people who understood the film, understood the audience, could talk to that audience. In our case, with that film, it's a highly sort of specific type of film, and therefore understanding how you could reach the people that would want to go and see it. There aren't actually that many people, I think, that could do it. And more than that, I think you need to feel like everything's going to be fair, everything's going to be clear and transparent, and that the people that you're working with are people that share your sensibility and that it's kind of fun to work with. And I think that was kind of who Oscilloscope were. So it was kind of easy to make the decision in the end, I think.
Yeah. And they came on quite a ways after Sundance, and I think people go into Sundance and a festival like Sheffield, if they're world premiering and all those kinds of things, looking for those deals, or looking for the interest, if not the deal. I mean, how did you feel going into Sundance? Did you have interest before that, or was it all meetings when you were there?
You go through a kind of, it's a really interesting journey where if you're doing everything right, then there's enough buzz that you think going in that maybe you're going to, if not be doing a deal there, you're going to be doing a deal in the quite soon afterwards. And it's only when you've been through the whole thing that you realise that it's really not like that anymore, I don't think. I mean, there were people doing big, interesting deals at Sundance, but I think there was interest beforehand, there was interest afterwards, there were lots of different kinds of offer, but I think that in the best possible way, you kind of come out of it all a little bit more realistic about what's going to happen. So I think it took about I think it was about 6 weeks afterwards that we really had a clear sense of kind of who was seriously interested in the film, and then the particulars of that and negotiating that take quite a long time. So.
And James, you are very good. I'm very glad you're on the panel because you have a very good understanding of online distribution, which I think is an area that a lot of filmmakers struggle with to understand. And I would love to know what you feel the role of an online distributor is, or where they're sitting right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing to bear in mind is when it all started to get easy to access online distribution platforms, everybody got excited that they were going to make quick and easy money, and that's not the case. Online distribution has I believe, specific role in the life of your project that you need to think about at the point that you birth your project. Still, festival, theatrical and television exhibition possibilities should be what you're thinking about for the earlier part of your film's life, if it's that kind of film, and then think about online later. Going online too early also can scupper your chances with other people who are sitting up here, for example. And indeed, festival programmers, sad but true. But then you might think from a different angle that what you're making your film for is not for those outlets. It may be more about building an enormous fan base to follow you as an artist for the rest of your life, who can then support you, whether it's with views online or tip jar investment through crowdfunding websites, or I just want to be a YouTube or Vimeo hit. And there's nothing wrong with that either. You do need to pay attention to that kind of thing when you are conceiving of your project. So I can't, with my Cinelan hat on, give any of you any money. All of our films are commissioned by invitation, and they play in blocks at festivals. We're playing, we've got 3 British premieres at Sheffield, and there are 2 points to the 30 films that we will make over the life of this project. One is they will be very good because good filmmakers are making them, but they want to then go ahead and inspire you to make films for our challenge. We've got $200,000 of prize money to make 3-minute films about the power of human invention. Our underwriter wants young people, especially...
Who's the underwriter?
General Electric.
Oh, very good.
Wants people to consider careers in science and technology and invention and engineering.
Rather than becoming Donald Rumsfeld, yeah.
Yeah.
How many 3 minutes do you do for this money?
30. There's 30 across the life of the project, and we've played 9 so far.
Okay, I'm going to, because I saw David come in.
You can have a smack at General Electric if you want.
No, I think General Electric, the great thing that General Electric did was telling Ronald Reagan about the nature of the American blue-collar class. And they have a lot to answer for. And to be serious, I think it's a really great company. And they make fantastic turbines and all that. And they're perfectly positioned to tell young people basically to become engineers and to come work for them. If that's what you want, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe General Electric will prove savvy enough to pick out the next Ronald Reagan, who will then become President of the United States and
How many years did you work for them?
Oh, how many he didn't? They sacked him. They basically sacked him because he got too obsessed with the Cold War and they thought it was damaging their image and their sales. But as long as he kept to the idea of convincing American working class that they should become Republicans, they were perfectly happy. There's a whole book about it.
There's a great film about it.
And a great film about it, yeah.
I just wanted to find out, we have a couple of distributors in the audience. I know Scott's here and David is somewhere lurking in the back. My one piece of advice, well, before we do advice, is to ask for advice. So I think you'd be happy for people to come and ask you advice about distribution afterwards? Sure. Yep. And David, you would as well? Yeah. They're both incredibly lovely, so feel free to ask them advice afterwards. How many filmmakers do we have here? Can we have just a quick show of hands? Okay, we've got tons. And how many people are going to Sheffield? A good amount. Okay, that's very good. Okay, that means I can keep the subject right. So my one question is, and this is kind of taking us away from distribution just for a second. I've seen it on other panels and it's always really helpful, but if you had one piece of advice going into a festival in your various job roles, what would it be?
Going to a festival?
Going to a festival. If you're a filmmaker, whether you have a film or not, and you're trying to make something happen, What would
Well,
your
I think
spoilers
it
be?
would be matters like try not to corner the commissioning editors in the toilets.
So how should they approach you?
No, look, I
Or
just
should they
think-
not at all?
I don't want to sound. He referred to me as a curmudgeon, and I'm not. I think basically
What did you say?
curmudgeon.
Oh, okay.
I think Ronald Reagan was a curmudgeon, and the people who run General Electric might be given a worse, probably designation than curmudgeons. But no, I think, look, have a great time and have something that you really believe in and love. And if you believe in what you have and love it enough and communicate that to people, then the film will get picked up and it would do very well. And there's no rule for distributing documentaries whatsoever. You just have to hope that you can patch together as many deals of a different kind so that you end up in the black at the end of it and don't feel that you wasted a lot of your life making something that no one watched. And people like me, our job is to try to make sure that people do watch your films. And if you're sort of nice to people like me, but not too nice because it gets horrible, that's all you can do. But basically, if you have something wonderful, that you have to hope that whatever it is that is wonderful will move, and it will do on the whole.
Okay, James, over to you.
I mean, I would amplify one small thing that these two have both just said. And if you find yourself in the position at a festival like Sheffield where you can network with the decision maker, make sure you know what that decision maker wants to hear. Don't just thrust a DVD at them because they've got enough posters
I really don't agree with that.
already.
If you know what they want to hear, you're going to piss them off.
I don't mean know what they want to hear. I mean know what they are
do.
working on
Yeah.
and what they acquire.
Yeah, but
or fund on.
just don't be creepy, though.
No, don't be creepy.
I think that's the crux of it.
I would, if you aren't going to Sheffield, I'd consider even at this late stage changing your mind.
Yes.
And I've learnt anything, and it's not very extensive, anything I know about the UK television industry. I'm South Australian. I've learnt from going to listen to Nick and others on stage at Sheffield. It's a fabulous, living, breathing, partying encyclopedia about the industry.
Yeah.
When you are there, get out of bed, go to films all of the time. Start as many conversations as you possibly can. And
try to watch the films that were not bought by the BBC and Channel 4.
no, and you know there are a lot.
Because often they're better.
I mean, and also you can see them on terrestrial broadcast. Anyway, take chances. I would also just I mentioned before I used to run a company called Shooting People. The sort of digital DIY guide to establishing your digital self as a filmmaker. We kind of wrote it all down in a wiki called Digital Boot Camp, which if you go to Shooting People, then knowledge, then Digital Boot Camp, and you don't have to be a member. Anything that I could talk about for 9 hours about this stuff is written down there. So it's a good toolkit.
Great, it's great. Okay, your piece of advice.
Well, I think you should watch lots of films and have fun, talk to people. As you said, as many people as possible, find out what's going on and who has bought what films. And so I actually work maybe in a different way because I screen a lot. And often, most of the time, I try not to know who has made the films. So it's like blind dates, I have blind DVDs and I put them in. If I like the films, I put a little sticker and say buy, or if I don't like it, no. And then I get back to the office and then we buy them, that's, and I don't sort of say, oh, this is a Werner Herzog film, so, I must have that, or it's probably better than I value it to be or something. I just go for what I...
Mette, you'd know if it was a Werner Herzog film because that
yes,
voice.
because of his voice.
Voice,
That's true. That's so annoying. You can't. But so I maybe, and it's also an ongoing process. You meet a filmmaker, young filmmaker. Often I'm in these pitch sessions with young filmmakers, and you meet them once, and they pitch something and doesn't really work, but then you see their film, and the next time you have a meeting with them, and it's sort of a 20-year process.
And I think that does come into another piece of advice, which is to put your film in the online library, because certainly as a festival programmer, that's where we watch films.
Yeah.
We can't go in as much as we love to see things in a theatre. We can't. So if you are looking,
I think getting help for films is very important.
Yeah.
Whether you're a young filmmaker or not young filmmaker, because the vanishing breed is actually what used to be called executive producers. and that is the people who paid enough money to devote a lot of time to making films better. And I think there's a rule in general that if you've made a lot of films, you find it easier to accept, with some reservations though, some people don't, you know, executive producers and their advice. But if you're starting out, if you find a brilliant executive producer, that's probably the most valuable thing that you can find, except having a broadcaster who'll sign a piece of paper agreeing to fund your next 5 films, which they're not going to do anyway. But I think executive producers are really, really important people.
Well, you should say. Oh, hang on, we're going to come to that in 2 seconds. I will come back. Just, do you want to give your piece of advice and then we'll throw it to you?
Okay, my advice if you're going to Sheffield, the first time I went there I was very earnest and I tried to speak to lots of decision makers. And I don't think I was creepy, but I think that
Were they drunk or what?
Well, no. They were drunk, they were sober. I was also drunk and sober. But the point was is that I tried to initiate conversations. I don't think that certainly didn't work for me, and it's very dispiriting as well. I think the thing that, and then the second year that I went, I just was so sort of annoyed by it that I didn't even bother trying to talk to anybody, and I essentially hung out with people that I already knew in a bar. And actually, interestingly enough, that tends to mean that you know more people when you come back next year, and there's a certain sort of critical mass where somebody says, well, you know, that person actually has an interesting project. And that's the thing that I would really recommend that you do. So with what you were talking about, which is kind of have fun and see some films, which means you'll have interesting conversation for other people like you. I think that's a very good idea. And then I also, the only other thing, if we're talking about distribution as well, is I think your point about executive producers is very, very true, which is that somewhere at that point when you're talking to lots of people and people are talking about you and saying, oh, they're quite interesting and they said something interesting about that film, is you will begin to meet execs, people. I think Shut Up and Play the Hits kind of in part started with finding a great executive producer who was savvy enough to lead us through lots of very difficult questions, and for which I'm very, very grateful. And then I think another thing about it was it also meant that we actually had friendships with people that were potentially sales agents and the person that went on to be the sales agent, and they knew you not as the person that was bringing that film to them and seeing if they would be interested in it, but actually somebody had a bigger idea about your sensibility and kind of who you were, and that I think was the starting point for at least being able to get the film out there so that people could see it. So I would relax and have fun and not worry about it too much and think of many Sheffields to come, I think.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we had a question. There we go. Perfect.
Yes, I want to ask something really practical. After you made a documentary, so what is the best way, or what is the best way to send this film to the people who are in the distribution or acquisition departments of the channels? Is it best way to send a trailer or just the whole documentary?
I think the whole film.
The
whole film.
Always the whole thing.
And I think also
But
DVDs are best at the moment, but that may change quickly.
So I think, well, in terms of selling, there's a lot of broadcasters and online. So, but if you really want out to a big audience, it is still the broadcasters who, if it's an important film and you have something, you know, that you think the world should know about. And I would go and find what films are similar to mine, who are selling them, try and contact these producers, say who are selling, is it going well, you know, how many countries has it been shown in and stuff, and then try and contact this distributor. I mean, you can also send it directly to me, but there's a lot of buyers actually who are not as visible and who are not as many places and who would buy your film, but you would never meet them. So if you want to really go around and get it on South Korean TV, Taiwan and Hong Kong, so get a distributor who goes to all the sales market and will push your film over and over and again.
And one more thing, sorry, I know that if you have more to say. Do you have more to say?
No,
okay. And another thing is that, for instance, after, let's say I send my documentary to whoever is interested in, then would it be the case that they might change? They might say to me, "You need to change this and that."
Yeah, all the time.
Okay.
You should change it.
So it should be only a base, you know. They also see it as a base, basically.
But I think that a lot of
as a raw material, rather.
Not a raw material, but I think, look, I think every documentary exists in lots of different forms, lengths, and if they're prepared to buy it, and they say, well, buy it if you change it, then change it, in my view.
I also think that it depends again, but you know, a lot of people having made the film, they think that everybody knows where Egypt is, or I don't know, you know, Sudan and so, but there will be information you need to put on so that the whole world will know about it, and sort of, you know, just the beginning of the film, you know.
My documentary is about an autistic Swedish boy, so I come to you.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Yes, just over here. If you want to wait for the mic, just quickly. Thanks.
Nick?
Yes.
Just a question, which is, I mean, what proportion of stuff that Storyville commissions is from in-house? And what sort of
None of
proportion?
it is in-house.
Oh, really?
No.
And what sort of stuff do you, forgive me, but I don't spend most
Stuff,
of the time
yeah.
in England, do you
Yeah.
produce?
Stuff indeed. Content, yes?
Yeah, content, yeah.
Product.
Stories.
Product.
No, what sort of
films.
stories?
Films, yes.
Feature films or documentaries?
No, we just do, we do documentaries of any length from any place in the world, and we aim to show what will work for BBC audiences, but the best documentaries in any year we can get hold of.
Okay. Next question is, would the best thing to do would be to pitch your treatment?
You can pitch us a treatment, or you can get halfway through the film and send us some stuff to look at, or you can send us something that's finished.
Great.
Whichever you like.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Yes, just there.
2 mics.
Yeah, I've got a question about distributors, actually. I know there's 2 distributors here, but can you foresee a time when we won't be using distributors? Because sales agents and distributors, basically, it's the kind of the fat of the industry that really consumes all the money. We as filmmakers, no disrespect, but it's very difficult to make any money out of it. Nick bought a film off me several years ago. It took 15 years to make, and we never made a penny out of it. Distributors did.
Didn't
we
BBC pay you? That's
Well, BBC paid, and he paid a healthy
okay.
sum. There's no sort of issues there, but distributors do take
How
a
much do we
big
pay?
chunk. And
How much do we pay?
55.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Well, there's
Lucky to get
Those
the
were
three.
the
there's definitely a lot of web tools around at the moment, which means that a filmmaker can find an audience and have a relationship with them directly. So much so that, for an example, this is much bigger in North America than it is here, but it is coming. A audience can be developed and warmed up and wooed, and when a film's ready, the audience can then demand of their local cinema a screening using some quite simple web tools. That's a little ways off maturing, and it's really nice when it works.
How can you?
That's a contribution
It would be
to that.
interesting to know.
How do
I know a certain number of figures about Kickstarter, which is slightly different. But
Yeah.
Are there any figures on the amount of money that people have made out of self-distributing their films? I mean, how significant is this? I mean, is it tiny amounts of money, or have people made a lot of money out of
It
this?
was tiny amounts of money, and it's only very rarely lots of money.
Okay.
And oftentimes it's specific types of films. Genre documentaries, films about longboarding, in Malibu. There'll always be a
sort of
community for
ultra
that.
niche films.
Ultra niche films, but with a really big, not
With an
necessarily
inbuilt
film-going
audience,
audience, but who's very interested in what it's about.
There are 2 examples of this. Firstly, Jennifer Fox's film about Buddhism did pretty well on Kickstarter, which, as you know, is sort of crowdfunding.
They have so much money, the Buddhists,
Buddhists are rich, and Buddhists are niche, and Buddhists probably know how to operate the internet. And what other things have done really well that way?
Well, an interesting thing that I'm watching rather than necessarily recommending is a UK started site called Vodo, which literally harnesses the power of what you might call internet piracy. I don't like that word because I think it's deliberately pejorative and unuseful, but peer-to-peer file sharing. Films that do well on that.
What, you mean like Pirate Bay did?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But rather than
Got a film about them.
rather than saying my film's been nicked by 2 million people, it's hello 2 million people have my film, and they'll download it. And they'll
How
watch
do they
all of
make
it.
a
So how do you
Won't-
get the money from
Tip
that?
jars.
How do you get the money from that?
Tip jars.
And what's the tip
So you
jar?
say, if you liked my film, I want some money to make my next one. Give me whatever you feel,
That's
or
if you're-
nothing.
If you're an author who did that, you'd be guaranteed to
So
end up in
you
a
know,
poorhouse. I think.
So if you look at Vodo now, there's a dozen or more films which have made around about $100,000 doing
Okay.
that. And I think $100,000 is, you'd be pretty pleased with yourself if you left Sundance with a check that big, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But again,
Yeah.
only about a dozen.
And could you say
and it's a certain
overall?
type
Can't
of
make a
content.
proper film for 100,000.
But can you
It's,
say overall, this type of distribution, is it propelling people to make more niche films on the whole? Yeah.
Yes, I would say so.
Possibly.
I would
Give
say
some
so.
more
And I
examples of
think-
the
I
kind
think
of
it's-
films they're making.
Oh, a lot of genre horror. I mean, it's a lot of the people who are on these kind of platforms, are bedroom laptop film consumer enthusiasts in that way.
But in the documentary sphere, I heard, does anyone seen Jiro's Dreams of Sushi? That's a whole film, took over $5 million at the box office in America, and he decided to make a film about sushi because he thought there was a large niche audience for sushi lovers. And the film is very good, actually. I enjoyed it very much. But that seems to be increasingly what people are doing, that they fix on a niche and they go to it because the niche is where the money
Well,
is.
you're almost reverse engineering your project by identifying the audience for it before you've even made a shot of frame.
Which is not a stupid thing to do.
No, it's not.
I mean, this is a really good question
It's
for
not, gonna,
Lucas.
it's
'cause
not going to replace everything. It's going to be an annex which is going to bulge.
So why
to
don't
an
you
existing
give us a
film
list of,
industry.
here are lots of documentary filmmakers, give us the top 5 niche subjects.
Greenwald, I suppose, would be the person
But
who's
the top
doing
5
it the
niche
most.
subjects, if you were out there now.
Skating and surfing. In narrative, you would say low budget, high thrill sci-fi, and horror,
Yeah.
and social change documentary.
But
Let's
they
not
don't.
go down that road, though.
They don't get funding that way. They're funded by foundations and
Oh,
stuff.
well, I'm not talking necessarily now about funding a film. I thought
Okay.
we were talking about distribution, which is my film's made and I've put it up there.
But social
and I've
change
publicised
documentaries,
it.
they don't get distributed. They get paid for by foundations on the whole.
Sometimes, yes, but many people make social change documentaries without big friends, don't they?
That's a whole other conversation.
It's a whole other conversation.
That's
I'm
another
gonna-
conversation.
I'm going to throw it to Lucas because Lucas kind of fits into this in that you have a film. The film is about LCD Sound System. It's their
Yeah.
last concert.
Yeah.
It has a very, very big inbuilt audience already. And in terms of what Richard was talking about,
Yeah.
you have a distributor in the US, but here you've chosen to self-distribute.
That's right.
So
yeah.
what was the reason behind that choice?
Well, I think that I was going to actually, I'll answer that question, but I'll start by answering Richard's question, which is that I think that to self-distribute, at least in the sort of the kind of marketplace that exists right now, you need a certain scale. So as a company, and what I mean by that is it's going to cost you loads of money. And so when we're self-distributing here in the UK, it's not because there weren't people that would distribute in the UK, it's because we wanted, we want to create a distribution business and we want that to be part of the company as a whole. And then the second thing is because we felt here that we understood what that audience wanted, which connects with the thing about it being a niche audience. I wouldn't call it niche,
No,
but nevertheless, it is a very specific audience that are going to be the way that you get a financial return. And we just felt that we could be more precise about what that was because we really understood it. And the other thing was that we wanted to do a lot of stuff around it in terms of events and other kinds of a whole experience, I guess, for that audience. And we weren't going to be able to get that working with a distributor here in the States. Oscilloscope were a great way of being able to do that. So I think that I can't anticipate what changes in technology are going to be happening in however long it is. But right now, I think to self-distribute, you have to be quite a big company in a way, and you have to have sort of cash reserves if you want to do it in the way that I would understand to be really meaningful. But then I may be old-fashioned. And then your question was it about our audience or how we thought about?
Yeah, what was your approach? What's going to be your approach to it? Because you haven't done it yet. I mean, this is uncharted territory for you.
Oh,
guys.
what's going to be our approach in the UK?
Yeah.
You know, actually,
What you can talk about.
What's the subject of the film again?
Okay, so there is a band called, or was a band called LCD Sound System, and they had a lead singer called James Murphy, and he was 42 years old, and his band was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they finally got the chance to play Madison Square Garden, which is always a big deal for a musician in America, and he decided to stop. So that was going to be the last concert he was ever going to play, and the film is in part about being 42 years old and deciding that the kind of life that you would like is not being a sort of rock star who, you know, is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but that you want to go and do other things. And I guess some of the other movies that we were thinking about was things like The Last Waltz or Stop Making Sense. So that's kind of what the movie is. And I guess we always thought about its appeal in two different ways. One of them is a sort of strange midlife crisis where you kind of want a normal life. You don't want to have a kind of glamorous, fun life. And the other one was for fans of that band. And I think the other thing that there were lots of people that we could have gone to and worked with if all we'd been thinking about was working with a band that had a pre-existing audience and everything else. But the reason that we wanted to work with James and with LCD was because my best estimate was that out of everybody who's around at the moment, they were going to be the most culturally significant, not just now, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And one of the things I was interested in doing, which hasn't got anything to do with money, was trying to make a film that I thought people would still want to watch a long time from now. So that was kind of why we chose LCD Sound System. The audience was big enough to mean that you could make it make sense.
Instead of George Harrison could also, but
we're not there yet.
Not George Harrison yet.
I think it's better than that, but anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. Someone gave up.
Yeah.
How much are you spending on the P&A on distributing this film? What are you spending on it?
That's all. I can't.
Okay,
we're
talking about figures that are well outside of the reach of a normal filmmaker. Are we?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean that's kind of what I mean, which is that I think you have to have a different kind of setup, and unfortunately, I don't think we're at the point where, if you like, as an independent operator, you could realistically do, I think, what we're going to do.
That's fair to say.
And you think documentaries can recoup at the cinema these days?
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't for me.
Do
Was
you?
it?
Not you.
Well, I don't see it in the days of like Michael Moore and those phenomenal amounts of money being made. But to me, the market isn't as big as it used to be. And the days at Sundance when they were writing 6-figure checks, Passion Pictures came away with 6-figure checks for 2 films. I think those days are gone.
Yeah. I think so too. Yeah. I think that there's advantages and disadvantages of the fragmentation of the market, and also because a lot of producers, filmmakers, they think that they were going to get lots of money by all these different ways, and it turns out, I mean, from the surveys that's coming in and the figures coming in, that it's actually the other way around. And it's of course, when there's a broadcaster, you always people always think when I say something, oh, it's because she's a broadcaster. But I think that also for broadcasters, it's well, I can tell you about a little survey we have done in Denmark, where we have big support by the Danish government, the Danish Film Institute, and it is so that if I have Danish films that we have fully funded, the 90-minute feature doc strands, feature doc films, and we market them ourselves, and there's no holdback and all these things, we get double as many watching the films. And when we have also nice film, let's say they're equally good, and so, but where there's holdback and they go in an art house cinema for 2 days, and they get absolutely maybe 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 people, and we get like 150,000 less viewers. So it's really a very complicated thing, and it's not like it's not a win-win situation, I think, because there's absolutely no money. It costs them lots of money to get it into the cinema, run the press themselves, and all these things. And that doesn't mean that I think that the film should not go into cinemas. I'm just saying it's a really expensive route, and it's only for 1 or 2 days, maybe in 4 or 5 cinemas. It's not how you can make a living, but if it's a lifestyle, it's something else. And if you're born rich, there's a lot in America, born rich filmmakers, and they can afford it, and that's cool. But it's also, in America, it's a different market. The broadcasters don't really commission documentaries. They don't invest in documentaries. They buy them when they are nominated for an Oscar or, you know, going to Sundance. So it's a completely different market to Europe. But I don't have any solution. I just say it's really, really complex, and I'm not really sure what way it goes.
I mean, I think we probably have to wrap up, I think. But you said there are advantages and disadvantages to the current situation. We all know the disadvantages. What would you say are the advantages to the current situation?
That is, you can invite your family to this cinema thing, and you can have a nice evening and drink champagne and be celebrated, you know, which is hard on TV.
I mean, I feel one of the advantages is we're in a very innovative time.
Yeah.
So I feel like with online and with things, people are figuring out. I mean, they might not be there yet.
It's
but
innovative in distribution, but not necessarily in what documentaries are.
No, that's true.
I mean, Nick and I, we've been working for years now. We feel many years on a big series on poverty, why poverty. And here we try, and as soon as it goes on cinema, it goes out on all platforms at the same time. And that's an experience we can only do because we have funded, you know, the broadcasters are funded. There's no other interest in it. And we don't know how it goes, you know, and it has like a special, I mean, that's really fantastic films, but we'll just see how it works and how when you share the content on the internet, how many people can you actually get to see the films on the internet and TV, and you know, just see how it goes. But it's, I don't really know, you know. I still think that more people will watch it on TV than even a free distribution on the internet.
It's not that different from journalism or books. There are many different ways of reaching people with what you do, but it doesn't mean you're going to make any money out of it. On the whole, the sort of Creative Commons aspect and the sheer diversity of, you know, ways of reaching people has to be a very good thing if we can learn to use it. But I don't think, speaking for the BBC certainly, but I don't think people have learned to use it yet. I think they're at a very early stage, and everyone has to get cleverer. But I think you should think the whole time. I mean, I absolutely agree about these niche things, but numbers are very important.
Yeah. Before you start thinking about the word receipts, start thinking about the link in the chain that comes before that, which is audience. That's what you're making the film for, and that's the big number you're trying to get. Now, whether they're in the cinema paying, or whether they're online chucking you a $5 in a tip jar, or whether they're just clocking you for your next project. It's all about crowdsourcing, not crowdfunding. I think that's the way to think about it.
That's very true. I think we're going to have to end there. And I will give the advice that we've had already, which is start your Sheffield experience early and have fun and meet each other. There are so many interesting people in this room. I know a lot of them. They're very, very interesting people. So do all meet each other. And thank you so much to Nick, James, Mette, and Lucas.